Wrestling fans are a passionate bunch, but sometimes that passion leads to some pretty wild theories. In the wrestling world, where the lines between reality and fiction are so often blurred, fans have come up with some truly strange ideas. Today we're diving in to the dumbest WWE conspiracy theories that some fans actually believed. For a long time there were fans who insisted that the man portraying Kane had changed at various points, and some have even said that his height has changed over time too. But just like any wrestler, Jacobs has been bulkier and more toned, but I can guarantee that his height has always been the same. Since he took the mask off in 2003, it's been obvious that Glenn Jacobs is the one and only Kane, finally shutting those fans up who insisted that WWE had been swapping out the wrestler. Although it's unsurprising really that wrestling fans have always been obsessed with the idea that WWE are replacing wrestlers under our noses, and it's no surprise because they've done it before. They did it with Doink, and years later they did it with Sin Cara, but in the case of the Ultimate Warrior it felt like a bit more of a stretch. The theory was that Jim Hellwig died in the early 90s and was replaced by another wrestler, possibly Kerry Von Erich. When the Ultimate Warrior returned at WrestleMania 8 after several months away, he looked just different enough for the rumours to start. Yes, Kerry Von Erich did look a bit like Jim Hellwig, but not that much. The big difference was they had different faces, which should have been a dead giveaway, but I suppose this was before the days of HD TV, and the Ultimate Warrior did wear a lot of face paint. There was even a theory at the end of the 90s that Vince McMahon himself was a paid actor. In fact, back in the Attitude Era, there were people who thought the entire McMahon family were fictional. I think there was a bit of confusion amongst the new WWF fans at the time as to what was real and what was fake, and it must have been confusing for those first-time viewers, because what kind of a boss of $1 billion company does this kind of stuff on TV? And the WWF did have a history of presenting fictional figureheads. Remember Jack Tunney from back in the mid-90s, who was supposedly the president of the Federation. That's when Vince McMahon was supposedly just a lowly commentator. Although if he had been fictional, then he could never have had that homosexual affair with Shawn Michaels. Sorry, I'm getting confused. That was another mad conspiracy theory. We can blame this one on Bret Hart, who started talking smack about Vince and Shawn after the Montreal Screwjob. He went on the Howard Stern show and insinuated that the men were having a gay relationship together.
Jerry, go ahead.
All right, Bret Hart, why would Vince McMahon get rid of you and keep Shawn Michaels? Shawn Michaels has been hurt for over a year with back injury, and he had knee surgery and everything. Why would he get rid of you? You were a bigger draw than Shawn Michaels. Shawn Michaels was like a little...
What about that? Anything to that?
I think that, I don't know, because you never know what goes on behind closed doors, but I really strongly think there's a link between some kind of a homosexual tie-in between Shawn Michaels and Vince McMahon.
What are you saying there, Brett?
Whoa, wait a second. Wait.
I'm just saying, I think it came down to, it really surprised me at all, and I think it's
you don't have
not
any
an
facts.
Accusation.
It's
I have
not
no facts, but I have a strong hunch that there's a little more to that than...
So there's no fact to that matter. There's
he might not have hurt his back in the ring, is what you're saying?
No, I mean, what you're saying absolutely has...
And while we can never truly know whether that was true or false, we do know that Bret was very, very angry at the time. Having said that, look at how Vince looks at Shawn here during this promo, and try telling me that he wasn't just a little bit in love. I want to find a woman that looks at me like Vince used to look at Shawn. And speaking of the Montreal Screwjob, believe it or not, there are still some fans that believe that the whole thing was a work of fiction. And considering how bitter Bret was and continues to be about the situation, it's clear that it wasn't a storyline. But believers in this theory argue that the presence of a documentary crew is a bit too convenient. Yes, there was a documentary film crew who were making a documentary about Bret, and they captured everything, the entire situation from their own cameras, including stuff that happened backstage. And the people who believe this theory argue that this was all set up by the WWF to boost their ratings and to create sympathy for Bret. But as anyone that saw Bret in Lonesome Dove will tell you, he's not that good of an actor. And there's the fact that Bret ended up in WCW for the worst run of his entire career. If he was still friends with Vince McMahon at the time, he'd have been back in the WWF like a shot after spending just a week in WCW. Which brings us nicely onto our next dumb conspiracy theory, that Vince McMahon sent Vince Russo to WCW in 1999 as a Trojan horse. During the Attitude Era, Russo was a key writer for the WWF and he was known for his edgy and controversial storylines. In 1999, Russo left the WWF and joined WCW to become the company's new lead writer. His booking decisions were so disastrous that many fans believed that he was intentionally trying to sabotage WCW. This led to the conspiracy theory that McMahon had sent Russo to WCW specifically to ruin the company from the inside. But let's be honest, Russo has a massive mouth and there's no way that he would have kept this a secret for the last 25 years. He does endless shoot interviews and podcast appearances and he would have had plenty of opportunity to reveal the truth in that timescale. The actual truth is that Russo needed Vince McMahon in order to keep him in check, and when Russo jumped ship to WCW, the WWF was on top. They were kicking WCW's ass. McMahon didn't need to employ Russo as a weapon of mass destruction. The company was already destroying itself at the time. Speaking of competition to WWE, it's hard to believe now, but in 2011, TNA seemed to be right on the edge of competing with WWE. It appeared that finally Vince McMahon was about to get some much needed competition, and when Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff joined TNA in 2010, it was a big deal. Surely these two men who were so important to the success of WCW could help the company reach the next level. However, their time in TNA was marked by controversial decisions that in the long run did more harm than good, and they ended up alienating a lot of the fan base and damaging TNA rather than helping it. Once again, the old Trojan horse theory popped back up as fans started to speculate that the men were employed by WWE in order to sabotage TNA before it got too big for its boots. But to be honest with you, I don't believe that Vince was ever aware of TNA's existence at the time. Although with some of the decisions that Bischoff made at the time, even I started to get a little bit suspicious. I mean, this is the guy that came up with the idea of Impact going head to head with Raw. What a dumb idea that was. Another bizarre conspiracy theory is the idea that Brock Lesnar went into business for himself at WrestleMania 30 to end The Undertaker's streak, which is obviously total nonsense. This was a theory that died out quite quickly because Lesnar, The Undertaker and Vince McMahon have all spoken since about the decision to break the streak, with McMahon admitting that he only decided on the day of WrestleMania to have Lesnar beat the dead man, and all three of them have discussed how controversial they knew this was going to be with the fans. And when you actually stop and think about it, it would actually be quite difficult for Lesnar to just change the outcome of the match on the fly as it was in progress, because Taker probably wouldn't have stayed down and the referee wouldn't necessarily have to count the three. Yes, I'm sure Brock Lesnar can be hot-headed, but he's not stupid, and you have to ask the question why. What motive would he have had to go into business for himself? And the other theory that The Undertaker changed the outcome of the match due to him being injured makes even less sense. WWE have got protocols for handling injuries as they happen in the ring, because if anyone knows the inner workings of a pro wrestling match, then it's Mark Calloway. Just chalk it up as another dumb theory by us wrestling fans. I'm sure there'll be plenty more of them in the future.